company Solar States is teaming up with the Philadelphia School District to help prepare students for careers using solar energy.
Solar States flipped the switch of the largest solar panel array in Philadelphia.
Welcome back to another episode of Yooo Sun!
Welcome back to another edition, the first ever video edition of Yooo Sun. I'm your host, Micah Goldmarkel, here with
Jared Pashko. And today on the show, we've got some exciting guests. Got the gentleman from Lumin. Steve and Phil are going to talk to us about all the cool stuff that they're doing over at Lumin Smart Panel. Nice to have you guys on the show.
That's
good to be here.
Good to be here. Long time listener, first time caller.
There we go. Love it.
Nice.
Oh, Phil's got the swag on.
We're all swagged out. We got to get Steven some swag.
Yeah, seriously. I'm feeling left out.
I just got some new shirts in. I mean, some new hats.
Nice.
New
Love
hats.
one of those. Those are sweet.
Cool.
Gotta get you guys some Lumin swag too.
Oh yeah, we collect swag all over the place. So thanks guys for coming on the show. Let's just start off with a little intro about what Lumin is and what it does. Stephen, do you want to give us a little overview of Lumin?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So Lumin makes the Lumin Smart Panel, which is an energy management device. It connects, it retrofits to existing load centers or breaker boxes in the home. We connect to the load center and manage generally the large loads in the breaker box. Our main use case is when paired with solar and battery backup. And so we're connected to the large loads in the breaker box, and when the power goes out and you switch from grid power to battery backup, we manage the large loads in the load center. So we can have them turned off so you're not rapidly depleting your battery if you're not there to manually manage your loads. We can prevent nuisance tripping by setting a power limit so that we're not exceeding the limit of the inverter and tripping the system. And what we're allowing for generally is whole house backup versus doing a critical loads panel or protected loads panel. And generally the way the storage is installed is that, historically at least, you would have a small subset of loads that would be backed up by the battery. And what we're allowing for is all of those loads to be backed up, and then we're just managing those large ones to allow for better experience for the homeowner.
Right. And I think it's good if we just take a step back for a moment and give people a sort of broader view here of why this is important. I think it sort of boils down to the difference between power and energy, right? I mean, people generally know that, hey, this battery has 13 kilowatt hours of energy stored in it. Okay, well, that could last me some period of time depending on how many things I have on and, how much energy they consume. But I think a lot of people don't really consider the fact that power draw is really important too. How much power all at once is being asked to come from the battery. And Phil, you're sort of the technical guy here. Do you want to talk about the issues with power draw?
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult thing in our industry because when people are looking at backup power for their home, typically they're going to be comparing batteries and generators, right? And
Right.
Generators are almost always listed in kilowatts or power delivered. So you get a 14 kilowatt generator, a 16 kilowatt generator, whatever the case, right? And batteries are almost always listed in kilowatt hours of capacity.
Right. It's apples and oranges. Yeah.
Right. And so people are looking at like, oh, my power wall is 13 and a half kilowatt hours, and this Generac Guardian is 14 kilowatts. They're basically the same.
No.
But of course, the Powerwall is delivering 5 kilowatts of continuous power, which you can find buried in their data sheet, right? It's not right there front and center. And then the generator they're not talking about their tank capacity because that's unique to every installation. They're talking about their power delivered. And so that apples to apples comparison gets really skewed for the homeowner. And that becomes difficult. It becomes difficult to sell. It becomes difficult to manage expectations. Right? 5 kilowatts can't do what 14 kilowatts can.
Right.
And that's really like where we step in as a product, is to say, let's shift some loads around. Let's make sure that we don't have a lot of things running at the same time. So maybe your 5 kilowatts can carry you pretty similarly to how your 14 kilowatts might behave.
Right. It's sort of a smart approach, let's call it, to
I mean, we don't
how
want
to
to
do.
on this early, but yeah, that we like to say that.
Yeah, yeah. And so, the Lumen, and in full disclosure, I've installed a bunch of Lumens. The Lumen is a fairly unique product that I've seen in the marketplace, in that, it's this box, and usually you think, oh, I got this box, I'm going to open it up, and I have to do things to install it. But really, you've made it so that the box itself never opens. There are wires that emerge from the box that intercept circuits in the house. So how did you guys come up with this sort of novel idea of we're going to intercept circuits to make them smart?
Oh, Steven, do you know Alex's original thought process there?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I can tell you kind of the general backstory behind the first Lumen Smart Panel being created, and that was basically our founder was getting into the renewable space, and was actually kind of starting in energy efficiency, but interested in getting into renewables, and was looking at all of these new technologies that were coming out, whether it was storage or just different IoT technologies that were out there, and kind of had this epiphany in looking at his dumb breaker box in his home, this great box that was just hadn't really changed since its inception, and realized that maybe there's an alternative here in terms of actually kind of the heart of the system. Maybe we can make this smarter. And then created the first Lumen Smart Panel, which is hanging in our office today, and has been decommissioned. But at any rate, as far as like the actual decision to intercept the flow of electricity, I mean, I think in large part it was a compatibility thing, right? Wanting this to be able to connect to any load center in the home, to make it smart and responsive, to not have to replace the entirety of the load center with a new box or a new device. So being able to retrofit and be compatible with anything.
Yeah, and I mean, philosophically, replacing load centers, doing main panel upgrades is time consuming and expensive, typically, especially if you're going to be using novel technology in that upgrade. And then if you're not totally replacing that load center, then you have all sorts of compatibility issues, right? There's different, there's compatibility differences between Square D and Siemens, between Siemens and Murray, right? And so if you're trying to
How about the
make
amount of space that you have on your wall? That's a compatibility issue we run into all the time.
yeah, actually, I mean, that's one that like we end up having more challenges with than what's actually in the load center. You take up space outside of the load center. But it's really, really difficult if you want to be universally compatible to be working at the circuit breaker level. So we know that we want the circuit breakers to behave we want the circuits to behave in a smart way, but we have to find some universal compatibility with all electrical devices. And what do all electrical devices have? Copper wire. And so for us, we're integrating into the copper wire. As long as the circuit is using the same metal, we're compatible with that circuit.
Right, right. So my installation experience, and again, you guys can jump in and correct me, is that you have two wires for every circuit in the Lumen, and one is for the electrical feed or the line side, and the other is for the load side where the circuit is going to. So you sort of have a smart device that sits between the electrical feed and then whatever it's going to, so that you can then turn on and off that individual circuit.
I tend to prefer to think of it as two ends of the same line.
Okay.
Right? Where one end goes into the breaker and one end splices onto the existing branch circuit.
Yep.
They are labeled that way. When you look at the conductors coming out of the Lumen panel, the wires coming out of the Lumen panel, you're going to see one end labeled breaker side and one end labeled load side.
Right.
And so, one end screws down to the breaker, one end onto the branch.
Yeah, we're just really intercepting that flow of electricity. We're either allowing it to continue to pass through from the load center to the end load or not. And that's dependent on, customer preferences, scheduling, grid status, right? So, and in doing so, we're also monitoring and reporting the consumption data of those circuits that we're connected to, as well as the whole home through some sequence.
And you have sort of pre-configured load sizes, so to speak, where you can handle a certain number of this type of load. Can you go through that for us?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the design of the Lumin Smart Panel is meant to mirror the standard residential home. So philosophically, what we're trying to do is to control what matters, which is our tagline. And so we want to be able to isolate and exert control over anything that's going to be power hungry. These are your pump loads, your HVAC loads, EV chargers, definitely, if you have that. So anything that's going to really threaten that backup system, we want to be able to control and shift around so you don't have a overload of your backup capacity. So when we designed the Lumin Smart Panel, we created spaces so that there were half of our relays controlling 60 amps or less, half of our relays controlling 30 amps or less. The 60 amp side are going to cover your really, really large loads, your ranges, your HVACs. The 30 amp side is going to cover some more basic ones, refrigerators, water heaters, stuff like that.
Cool. And so how many loads can you have running through the Lumin?
It's a great question. There is no one specific answer. The product is designed to be flexible so that it's customizable for every unique home. So it can be as little as 6 if you have a lot of very power hungry loads. It can be as many as 12 if you want a greater diversity for your monitoring control.
And I think one of the things that I feel like people maybe don't fully understand is this all is controlled through an app on your smartphone, right? So as a homeowner, you're popping open your phone in bed and looking at how much energy the devices in your house are using. And even cooler than that, you're able to actually set a lot of these kind of automated protocols. If power goes up to here, turn this thing off. If power goes down to here, turn this thing on. And all of those kind of preconditioned settings, at least for me, a lot of times when we're talking to folks that are looking to get battery backup systems along with their solar arrays, a common concern that comes up is, well, what if it's the middle of the night and I'm not able to kind of shift around the loads in my house, and I wake up in the morning and it's freezing because, the battery's dead and, the heat was just pumping all night long? Or what if I'm on vacation and, I'm not at the house and I'm not able to change the setting? Like, this is really anywhere in the world. You're hopping on the internet and you're able to make all of those alterations in order to preserve the life of your battery based on kind of what your goals are in real time, right? As they change over the course of 3 hours, 5 hours, a day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'll say, and both Phil and I come over from the sales world for, sold solar for 4 years plus, and Phil for several years as well. And, at least in my experience, and I think that you guys would, potentially be able to echo this, you kind of get two types of customers, right? You get the folks that are like, probably going to talk shop with you and you're going to talk mods and talk, inverters and batteries and everything. And those are the folks that are going to be like super hands-on with their Lumin. They're going to be in their app. They're going to be configuring things. They're going to be geeking out at all the data, setting schedules, like, reprioritizing circuits, all of that. Then you get the folks that are just like I want to save money. I want to do good for the environment, maybe. For a lot of those folks, it's more of a kind of set it and forget it type of thing. So in the commissioning process, you talk with them about their priorities. What do you want to have access to over other things? You set that up for them, and then they're pretty much good to go 90% of the time. Maybe seasonally, they might want to relocate some circuits to have a higher priority for, like, an oven over an AC in the winter, for example. But that's kind of the beauty of it, is that it is really kind of a hands-off type of approach to energy management. But it can be hands-on for the folks that want to have that additional control capability.
Yeah, I did a presentation a few months ago, and we got to the Q&A part, and one of the guys said, like, well, what do you do if people just don't check the Lumin app? Like, is that a problem? And I said, like, no, that's what we want. It's like it works. It's all automatic. If someone is toying around in their app all the time, having to change the settings, we've become invasive. That's what we're after. We want people's systems to work the way they're expecting.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think some key functionality that really is just critical to the whole sort of idea that this is for battery backup and solar is the fact that you're sensing power from the grid, and that you can know, Lumen can know when the power goes out and reset itself to say, okay, well, now that the power is out, we have a certain setting where, the high draw loads are off unless the customer specifically calls them on, or any subset of what the customer's wishes are, should the power go out and the battery take over for the house. Now, with that said, I'm wondering, is Lumen capable of doing things like working with time of use rates, where you could set times of the day where heavy loads won't come on, so that you can take as much advantage of time of use rates as possible? Is that something that's there already, or?
Yeah. So, I
in the
mean,
future?
again, we try to have all of our inputs be customizable. So it's not the kind of thing where you're inputting which utility company you have and which rate plan you're on, and then
Mhm.
automatically Lumen takes care of everything else. It is going to require a little bit of manual intervention, but what you
Mhm.
do is you can set schedules, which will automate the off on of a circuit around those time of use plans.
Cool. Very cool. Do you see yourself sort of automating utility rate plans in the future, or are you like, no,
I mean,
customization is really our thing?
Stephen and I were just talking about this morning. Definitely, as more data becomes available and as more utilities start to participate in making data available, definitely something that we're moving towards. As it stands right now, there is some responsibility on the end user for understanding their rate plan.
Hmm. So, sort of as things stand now, a Lumen gets installed, it intercepts circuits. You can have an app, you can have presets about when certain things can be on or off based on whether the power from the utility is working, or potentially time of day,
Mhm.
sort of things. What do you see as the future for Lumen and the app in terms of, hey, this, we're going to go with some features for the next generation, and this could be cool?
Stephen, you want
Yeah.
to?
Well, I was going to say, I can certainly start it off, and then Phil, you can jump in. But what will be available in the very near future is similar to what we're doing right now with what we call smart power mode. So setting a power threshold when the power goes out, we're assuring that your system's not going to trip, right? We're not going to have too many things running at the same time, exceed the limits of the inverter, and trip the system. We're going to be able to do that in an on-grid environment as well. And there are a few different use cases for this, where this could be advantageous. As we see net metering laws change, in California, for example, most recently, but a lot of other states are being threatened by that, including Florida and North Carolina. I think next year will be changing their net metering laws, or in the near future. But what we'll be able to do is to set that power limit for on grid as well. And the idea here is basically making the grid kind of your last resort. So if you're self-consuming off of a battery and you have that power limit set, if you exceed that power limit, instead of pulling from the grid, we would shed loads to stay below it. So you're really only utilizing the grid if your battery is completely depleted. So if you think of states like Hawaii and California that are, have already experienced these changes in net metering laws, it's really advantageous for them to be able to run off of storage as much as possible without pulling from the grid. Phil,
Well,
I see you.
and also like for everyone who's ever had that experience of getting like, a $300 surprise bill and thinking like, well, gosh, what if I just took a crowbar and ripped the meter off the wall? Like for
I've
everyone,
thought about that all the time.
we've all thought it's natural. Nobody likes paying the power company. And I'm sure you guys have had a ton of people call in and say, like, I'm done with it. I want the meter off. Solar storage, set me up. And of course, there's a lot that goes into that, not just from like a permitting standpoint, but also off-grid living has some very specific restrictions on what you can and can't do. But
Right.
demand side monitoring and control can at least render the utility as your last resort, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Say like, okay, we're going to prioritize the solar. After the solar, we're going to prioritize the battery. And if there is nothing coming from either of our other sources, then we'll sip a little bit, right? And I think that
Yeah, and
was a demand that people have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
100%. And I'll just briefly touch on the other kind of use cases for this sort of on-grid smart power mode. One being certain states where you see residential demand charges. So Arizona being a big one, but being able to set that threshold to stay below the limits that would trigger those demand charges. And then lastly, and this one, it can be related to solar and storage, but avoiding service upgrades. So for folks that are in need of or adding an electric vehicle charger to their home, for example, or electrifying appliances in the home. If you're on 100 amp service, sometimes that can require a service upgrade in order to be able to add those things. That can be costly to the homeowner. It can even require significant grid upgrades to transmission lines and transformers potentially. So that cost can add up. What we're able to do in managing loads in an on-grid environment is to set that threshold based on the existing infrastructure and the limitations of that infrastructure in the home to be able to stay below it while adding an electric vehicle charger, for example. You're just not having those things run coincidentally. So we're excited about that additional use case in the future.
Hey, Jared, I'm wondering, do you think clients are understanding the full capabilities of the Lumin, or maybe that's the wrong question. Do they seem interested in knowing this stuff, or is it just like, hey, I just want my system to work, and you can say, well, the Lumin will help it work better?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest advantage in my mind to the Lumin, as you guys kind of said, is you're getting this whole home backup capability. And it just feels like a really robust solution in terms of saying to somebody, hey, we're going to install an energy management system with smart capability that's going to be able to be automated. It's going to be able to be manually controlled. You're going to have all of this data. And so rather than you having to sit here and pick out 6 of the loads in your house that are most important to you, which, by the way, the 6 that I'm going to let you pick out are the ones, not the ones that you want. I'm going to put this in. We're going to install a battery. And guess what? In 2 years, you're going to come back and you're going to install another battery. And nothing's going to have to change. We're just going to change some settings in the Lumin, and you're going to be able to power more stuff for longer. And in 2 years after that, you're going to install another battery, and we're just going to change some settings. I think that narrative really speaks to our customers, Micah. I think they have no clue what I'm talking about until it gets installed. And then I think once it gets installed, they're like, this thing is awesome. Because it's just so easy and clear. And also there's just so much data and controllability. One of the things that, we have a lot of solar customers coming back looking for batteries. And, we've got a ton of data on how much solar production there is and how much household consumption, how much usage of electricity there is, but not on a circuit by circuit level basis. So when these people start asking questions like, well, how long is it going to last? Well, what do you want to run? Oh, this, that. Well, I only have kind of one graph to go off of. And, we're able to do some really good guesstimating and analysis based on kind of the time of the loads and the size of them. But when somebody has a Lumin, I mean, it's just a whole world of added, configurability.
I'll give a fun little anecdote. I've got an old buddy of mine who lives up in Portland, Maine, and they've had rising utility costs lately over the past couple of years. And he doesn't, he lives in a modest place. It's an apartment in downtown, and he just got a huge electric bill, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. And so, we're doing this little notebook project where I got him a P3 meter. and he's plugging it into all of his different appliances and taking a 24-hour reading so we can get average consumption. And like this whole process, and this is just to identify what's going on with his bill, right? The whole
Yeah.
process is going to take us weeks, right? Because we have to get 24 hours of usage for each appliance, right? We're probably
And
going to
honestly, that might not even be good enough because like his heater isn't running right now. You know, it's like we
right.
installed a whole bunch of those circuit level monitoring devices at a client's house for 3 months, and we got a lot of really good data. But it was the middle of the summer. AC
Right.
units were out the roof. We're like, well, you're going to need 12 power walls.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, no, exactly. And I just think to myself, like having the ability to have that circuit level data. I mean, I could identify in 10 seconds what's going on with his surprise billing, what would otherwise take me or is going to take me weeks of meticulous note taking to
yeah,
to diagnose.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's important to note too a little bit to folks out there that in some ways our electrical systems are like the bank in that they're designed to be sort of larger than, like, if everything was on all at once, you'd have a problem. There's not all, if everybody went to the bank and got all their money out all at once, there'd be a problem because the bank doesn't have it all. But that's the way the system is designed intentionally because it never happens. And so, again, I want to come back to make sure that people understand the difference between power and energy is that energy is power times time. So you have this idea that you could have a power need where it's very quick and very sudden, but it's a lot of power, but the energy draw could be a lot lower over time.
Of course.
And so a lot of these battery systems, have limitations for the maximum amount of power. Some of the systems we install have limitations as low as 30 amps. Some go 50 or 60 amps in terms of the power draw at any given instant. So when an HVAC unit kicks in, it can be drawing 20 to 30 amps, depending on the size or more. And so if you were to have that and say an EV charger come on at the same time, even though there's enough energy stored in the battery to handle those things operating for a longer period of time, the power to get them all started all at once would be more than what the battery could put out, and it would shut down the entire system. And so that's, really what we're talking about here is how do we avoid that scenario while also having the functionality to say, well, what if I want that thing to come on? Well, then you can control other things to make sure that they don't come on.
Right.
By the way, I just want to say really quickly, you just said, oh, a HVAC system maybe use 20, 30 more amps. I mean, the average homeowner has no clue how many amps any of their
That's right.
devices are using.
It's true.
These labels, like on your refrigerator, are so obscured in like the back left corner on the upper shelf. And like, it's so funny to me because it reminds me of when I was a kid and I would like look on the car at the odometer and like whatever the highest number was, how fast the car could go, oh, it says 160. Like they just go down into their breaker panel and they're like, it's a 60 amp breaker, so I guess it uses 60. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. There's more specific sizing requirements or, different types of startup loads versus ongoing loads. And, that's kind of a black box for a lot of people. And, to your point, Phil, digging into that in like a really systematic way is very time consuming. People, generally speaking, don't have the time to do that. And so like having something like a Lumin, I think is like a really easy way to give people a lot of comfort without having to kind of get a degree in electrical engineering.
Right. And, Micah, to that exact point, there are so many appliances in the house that just have regularly operating duty cycles that if you push back a duty cycle by 5 to 10 minutes to allow another appliance to finish, you'll never notice the difference.
Never notice it.
The difference between an air conditioner turning on for 5 minutes, 10 minutes from now, or 15 minutes from now makes no difference in the temperature in the interior. Same goes with the water heater. You'll never notice that 1 degree difference.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wonder if there's a future where you could integrate with utilities. and saying, hey, we're having peak demand times. Maybe there's some way that Lumen could have a value proposition with utilities.
So I mean that
You heard it here
the,
first.
the
There it
future
is. Breaking news.
the
Yooo
future
Sun
is
came.
now. So we're actively working with a couple of different utilities for demand side management, for demand response programs. So being able to, because we think of these, we could talk about it at the home level, which is what we're doing with smart power mode, and again, avoiding nuisance tripping or allowing for service upgrades, things like that, or avoiding service upgrades rather. But in aggregate, the reason that we have, we see rolling blackouts, rolling brownouts, are because of the strain that's put on the grid when too much power is being pulled, coincidentally at the same time across, several, hundreds of thousands of homes. Lumen can be used to manage these individual loads in homes, but it can be controlled in aggregate. So there can be these demand response programs where an event is triggered, and maybe several hundred homes are turning off water heaters for a brief amount of time to reduce that coincidental load and reduce the strain on the grid, and to avoid some of these rolling brownouts and things of that
And
nature.
so in those scenarios, is that like homeowners would get some kind of incentive, like a discount on their bill or kind of a rebate check of some kind?
Exactly. Yeah, they can be structured in a number of different ways. So there can be a direct kind of payment associated with it, a rebate. There can be a better rate structure.
Right.
And then one of the things that's nice is that with our system, there's flexibility there. So the homeowner has the option to, maybe they're not comfortable with shutting off their HVAC at a certain point or something because it's super hot out or something. But maybe some folks are not home and they don't care so much. So they have flexibility to be able to opt into these programs or opt out, depending on how they're structured. And demand response programs can be structured in a number of different ways.
And just for context, a rolling blackout is a demand response event. So that's the alternative, right?
Right.
What happens
And
rolling
yeah,
blackout? The
that's a
utility
great
can
point.
no longer provide all of the demand, and they respond by turning off an entire section of homes, right? No power entirely. And so for us, the alternative is, wouldn't it be better if we just gave you the option to get a rebate on your bill for delaying your water heater from cycling for an hour?
Yeah.
Right. Like
And
those are the two options.
And there's also the people out there, okay, who are government and controlling my system. Never going to happen. Not going to do it. People should realize that you have very granular control over these things. It's not like they can come in and turn your lights out for the rest of the day to prevent a blackout. It's granular control, things that, as Phil said, maybe your HVAC misses one cycle, you won't really feel a difference. And even if you started to, you could turn off the demand response and those sorts of things. So people get very concerned, and rightfully so, about privacy issues and functionality issues. But the way that I've seen these programs rolled out, they're very granular. They allow you to have a lot of control, and you're working in partnership with the utility. It's not just the utility coming in with a sledgehammer and shutting your whole house down and saying, okay, too bad for you. There's, you agreed. You said we could turn you off in the middle of a brownout.
Yeah, most of those people, I think, the minute they start seeing the dollar signs, the equation starts shifting,
changing significantly. Sure.
There's a couple states that have something very similar with batteries, where actually on the opposite side of the demand, right on the supply side, they're sending battery power to the grid to increase the supply of power to prevent, I guess a brownout or a rolling blackout.
Well, this is the, not to be too grandiose here, but this is the grid of the future. We're going to have a lot of distributed energy resources.
Yep, totally agree. And we're really excited to see what Lumen brings to the grid of the future. That's what we're here to support, as solar states, distributed energy generation. So thank you, folks, for coming on. This has been another episode of Yooo Sun. I've been your host, Micah Gold-Markell, here with
Jared Pashko. Take it easy, everybody. Peace out.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, we didn't do a rapid shutdown. there's
That's
big
right.
news this week, Micah. There's big
Okay.
news this week.
Hold on. Jared's
This
going to bring in
week,
a rapid shutdown.
right? The rapid shutdown.
Down. Oh, rapid shutdown. Down.
This week was the 1-year anniversary of the
Oh, right.
Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA.
That's
Can you
right.
believe that? It's been a year. I mean,
Wow.
a year ago, I think we were told that 9 months ago we were going to have guidance on every single piece of this thing. And,
Glad you said it.
you know, we're just about getting around to understanding the rules and regulations, but the wind is at our backs, it feels like, and the momentum's picking up. It's pretty exciting.
It's a huge piece of legislation.
Yeah.
I tell people I think it could be the most consequential environmental legislation of my lifetime. So I think the Biden administration is to be applauded. Secretary Granholm is to be applauded. And we really have to use this time to make a lot of progress, and we're seeing it across the industry. So that's a great point, Jared.
If that's not a pitch to have those people come on our podcast, I don't know what is. I mean,
Secretary Granholm on Yooo Sun.
Talk about pandering.
Yeah. Secretary Granholm will be on Yooo Sun. Here we go. You heard it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Awesome.
Have a good one.
Peace out.
Thanks for having us.